Fledgling Spanish brand Cupra offers a surprisingly appealing compact family EV with sporting genes. This car, the Born. This is only the company's second standalone model, the first to be rear-driven and the first to be fully powered by electricity. It takes all the clever ingredients of other VW Group EVs, but blends them into a more engaging and characterful confection.
Once you've got over the rush of torque from standstill, family EVs aren't generally much fun to drive. What if you could have one that was, yet still managed to be as practical, ecological and frugal as its battery-powered rivals? That's the promise of this car, the Cupra Born. You may by now be vaguely aware of the Cupra brand. Once it was purely a performance badge on fast Seats, but now it's a mark in its own right, offering two repackaged Seat models, the Cupra Attica and the Cupra Leon, and one design of its own, the Cupra Formentor SUV. Cupra was clear from the start that electrification would play a major part in its product development, and sure enough, the Leon and the Formentor can both be had in plug-in e-hybrid forms. The Born, though, is a full EV, first shown in 2019, badged as a Seat L Born, a model never actually sold because it was decided instead to repackage the car as a Cupra Born. In which form? It was eventually launched here in late 2021. It uses all the same engineering you'll find in a Volkswagen ID.3, but delivers it with a performance twist. And a slightly longer body, allowing you to also consider it as a rival to marginally bigger VW Group EV models like the Volkswagen ID.4, the Skoda Enyaq iV and the Audi Q4 e-tron. Cupra claims that it's sportier to drive than all of these development cousins, and most other rivals too. We'll see. This, then, is the Born identity, and we're going to subject it to the usual comprehensive car and driving road test. It's all appropriately futuristic behind the wheel. No gear stick, no handbrake, no ignition key. You don't need a start button either, because just taking a seat is enough to activate everything. Then, as the two screens in front of you spring into life, you twist the gear selector for the single-speed auto transmission, an appendage protruding from the right-hand side of the instrument binnacle which operates in two directions. Forwards to select D for drive or B to alter brake energy regeneration, and backwards to select either neutral or reverse. That absent handbrake is replaced by just a button for park that you'll need to engage at your destination. Set off and it releases automatically. It springs away from rest, of course, as all EVs do, running out of puff just after the point where you realise that the torque rush has inadvertently pushed you over the speed limit. Everything so far is just as it would be in the Volkswagen ID.3. This Born is almost entirely based on. But Cupra wants to convince you that this is a far sportier confection, and to that end has fitted shorter coil springs, lowering the ride height, along with wider tyres, a more direct variable ratio steering setup and a retuned stability control system. To fit with all this, the electric power output of the kind of Born model most people will choose, 204 PS as here, is the kind of output only offered at the heady heights of the ID.3 lineup, though the 58 kilowatt-hour battery it's linked to is the one that most versions of that VW use, here delivering a range of up to 265 miles. That figure falls fractionally to 262 miles if you add in the optional e-boost motor you can't have on an ID.3, which adds an extra 26 PS of power for 30 seconds when you stamp on the throttle, and ought to have been standardised on the Born to give it a more significant, unique selling point. The 230 PS e-boost motor comes as standard if you pay the extra for the larger 77 kilowatt-hour battery, which increases driving range to 343 miles. You'll only get close to that figure if you habitually select the most frugal of the available drive modes, which is range, and if you habitually twist the gear toggle into its available B regenerative setting, in which mode the regen system slows the car off throttle, but not by enough to deliver the kind of one-pedal driving characteristics you get from some segment rivals. Other models in the sector allow you to select different regeneration settings to vary that braking effect, but VW Group engineers clearly don't trust customers to get this right, because there's nothing of that sort here. They don't seem to want you to over-fiddle with the drive modes either, because the activation for them is buried away in a central screen sub-menu. Until you realise this, you'll be pecking away at the drive mode button on the left steering wheel spoke, which is actually only there to activate cruise control and the speed limiter. Once you find them, the other real drive mode options are revealed as being comfort and performance, plus individual if you want to tailor throttle response and steering feel yourself. E-Boost models get an extra full-on Cupra setting, which again is something that ought to have been standardised across the range if the brand really wanted to set this car apart. Performance certainly makes throttle response a bit peppier, spinning the permanent magnet synchronous motor up to 16,000 RPM and delivering 62 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds in this 58 kilowatt-hour 204 PS model. It's 6.6 seconds in the 230 PS E-Boost 58 kilowatt-hour version, or 7 seconds in the heavier 77 kilowatt-hour E-Boost model. Top speed, though, as usual with affordable EVs, is limited on all Borns to double digits, 99 miles an hour. The alternative comfort drive mode won't do much of anything unless you pay the substantial amount extra that Cupra wants for its dynamic chassis control system, something you don't really need because the standard passive damping setup is very good indeed, which wasn't what we were expecting given the chunkier tyres, huge wheels and lowered suspension. The Barcelona engineers must have worked really hard on that. It's disappointing then that they weren't given leave by Wolfsburg to fiddle with the steering, which doesn't seem to have been improved much by its supposedly quicker rack and progressive setup, feeling remote and very light on feedback. That's a pity because despite the substantial curb weight of over 1.8 tonnes, the excellent body control, aided by near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution, might otherwise put you in the kind of sporty mood Cupra wants to engender. Even as it is, this is, as intended, a far more engaging thing than its ID.3 cousin, to the point where we'd find it hard to think of another similarly sized EV in this price bracket that we'd recommend over this one to a keen driver. Which bodes well for future Born supremacy, in the form of the all-wheel drive twin-motor version that Cupra is unlikely to be able to resist making, given that all the drivetrain technology for it already resides in the Volkswagen Group parts bin, having been created for the only slightly larger Volkswagen ID.4 GTX. At the other end of the spectrum sits an entry-level, smaller battery 45 kilowatt-hour, 150 PS entry-level derivative that the UK importers hadn't decided whether to import at the time of this test, and which wouldn't do much for this Born's mean, racy image. Rear-wheel drive fits with that. This is Cupra's first such model, and when you drive a Born in town, you quickly realise the real advantages of placing the powertrain out back and freeing up the front wheels for steering duties. The turning circle is a London taxi light, 10.2 metres, better than parent brand Seat's tiny old Me city car model, and the car is superbly manoeuvrable, jinking through traffic hold-ups and darting into spaces. At higher speeds, when you'll dispense with thoughts of regenerative harvesting, you'll notice wind and tyre noise, but only because there's no engine note to mask them. You might, like us, rather regret the way that technology has dispensed with the need for that, but it's hard not to be impressed by the sophisticated drive systems that marching progress has brought with it. This Cupra's optional travel assist setup, for instance. This system largely takes over acceleration and braking from the driver at any speed, and also helps keep the Born in its lane with appropriate steering interventions. In conjunction with adaptive cruise control, it always keeps the right distance to the vehicle in front, and works with the car's standard Eco Assistance feature that uses GPS mapping data to automatically slow the car as it enters built-up areas. If this sort of thing suggests the beginning of the end of driving as we know it, then cars like this Born are ready and waiting to ease us into this brave new world, with a note of reassurance that maybe it'll be that bit more satisfying than we might think. Cupra says this Born was designed and developed in Barcelona, which is poppycock, of course. It's a restyled Volkswagen ID.3 and rolls down the same German Zwickau production line as its sister car, unlike Cupra's other Iberian-built models. You can't deny, though, that it's got a bit more flair, attitude and presence than its Wolfsburg cousin. It's been described as the scary big sister to the ID.3. Maybe so. It's certainly a little bigger, something you may pick up from a profile perspective, the Born measuring in 61mm longer, though that still leaves it some way short of the upper mid-sized EV hatches and crossovers Cupra also wants to target. Volkswagen's ID.4, for instance, is 262mm lengthier. It's here from the side that the ID.3 parentage is easiest to pick up, though Cupra has tried to disguise it with a sharp A-pillar design and a C-pillar created using a three-dimensional textured surface finished in a contrast colour to give the impression of a floating roofline. A lower ride height than the Volkswagen is a further part of the illusion, the suspension pitching the car 15mm lower at the front and 10mm lower at the rear. Drawing your attention to big wheels with aero inserts and copper-coloured centre bezels that, according to trim, are either 18-inch, 19-inch or, as in this case, 20 inches in size. Copper highlights, as usual with Cupra, are an overriding theme, especially here at the aggressively angled nose, where they adorn the badgework and the frame that draws your attention to the prominent lower intake, designed to channel air towards the radiator for better battery thermal management. Full LED headlights, decorated by small triangles on the side of each lamp, flank the concave upper section that sits like a shark nose. Rear view mirror presence? This car has it. Just as different from anything with a Volkswagen badge, but perhaps a touch less successful, is the rear treatment. Cupra's usual coast-to-coast style tail lamps stretch across the tailgate, capped by an upper spoiler that connects seamlessly to the C-pillar. Lower down, body-coloured integrated diffuser supplies the required sporty vibe, and under it all sits the car's sophisticated MEB platform, development of which took the lion's share of the £54 billion the Volkswagen Group spent in developing its new era EV technology, which is being licensed widely. It's estimated that there could be up to 20 million cars running on these same underpinnings by 2029. The lighting technology here includes an animated ceremony as you approach the car. There's no need to press a key fob to get in, and as you swing open the door, Cupra puddle lights shine down at your feet. But just how Cupra has the Volkswagen Group conglomerate allowed this Spanish brand to be inside? Well, it's actually quite a different ambience from the other compact VW Group EVs available at this price point, and quite an agreeable one. What is familiar is the futuristic feel. As with an ID.3 or a Skoda Enyaq, there's no need for a gear lever, an ignition slot or a handbrake. And as with those cars, there's a 12-inch centre monitor and a 5.3-inch digital cockpit instrument screen, attached to which is a gear selector, the whole binnacle moving up and down as you adjust the wheel. Otherwise, this Born sets itself apart with a darker vibe, a strange indented passenger side dash finish, sustainably sourced soft touch surfaces, and the usual Cupra brand copper-coloured highlights, which here appear on the steering wheel, the vents, the seat stitching, and frame the open part of the lower centre console. We'd like to have seen Cupra borrow the ID.3's clever ID Light strip, which on that car interactively emphasises driving functions. Here, there's merely a more conventional, multicoloured interior lighting system. Something the Spanish brand doubtless would have liked to dispense with are these touch-sensitive steering wheel spoke buttons, which everybody seems to hate. It takes time to realise that you have to swipe rather than press them, which isn't a natural action when you're driving. And the left one inaccurately advertises drive mode functionality, delivering instead cruise control and speed limiter. The drive modes you'll need far more frequently are irritatingly buried away in the centre screen, unless you opt for an e-boost model, which has drop-down steering spoke buttons. That middle display isn't universally much liked either, occasionally slow to load, lacking any physical buttons, and sometimes also lacking back functions to return you where you need to be as you scroll about. Cupra has reskinned it with Iberian graphics, but it's essentially the same one you'll find in those other comparable VW Group EVs we mentioned, which means you get these fiddly lower sliders for temperature and volume, invented in times where we weren't all slavering our hands in sanitizer. There are two home screen display options, a split screen or another with rows of icons, rather strangely bleeding off to the right. Whichever you choose, the lower part of the monitor gives you shortcut options for navigation, audio, phone, smartphone mirroring, driving data and vehicle functions. Everything you really need is here, including an e-manager section for EV functions, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, and a reasonably intuitive voice control system. The instrument screen you view through the three-spoke wheel isn't really big enough to show you much, though you can swipe the steering wheel view button to better display drive assistance features. The top of this little monitor has time, speed limit and temperature readouts, while in the centre there are bigger graphics for the speed, gear selection, battery percentage and driving range info you'll need. Plus, provided you avoid entry-level trim, you'll have access to lots more info further up in your sightline, courtesy of an augmented reality head-up display. You're positioned in front of all this very comfortably on supportive sports seats, trimmed with sustainable upholstery, either sequel yarn fashioned from upcycled Mediterranean marine plastic rubbish, or, as in this case, plusher-looking Dynamica microfiber made from the polyester fibres found in old T-shirts and other abandoned pieces of unwanted clothing. It's all a very comfortable way of displaying your planet friendliness, especially in this top V3 variant, which embellishes these front chairs with a massaging function. Build quality from the German Zwickau factory seems fine, and the hard, low-rent plastics that rather let the side down inside an ID.3 are less noticeable here. Some of the same irritations persist though, like the way that the important volume and temperature controls at the bottom of the centre screen don't illuminate at night, nor does the inside of the glove box. And the switches for the rear windows and door mirrors are needlessly fiddly. But the slim A-pillars, large windows and front screen make the Born easy to see out of, and practicality is well taken care of, with a cubby between the seats enhanced in depth by the absence of the usual transmission tunnel and featuring twin USB-C ports and an optional wireless charging mat. It's a pity that the glove box is halved in size by the fuse box and that an overhead sunglasses compartment has been omitted. But you get big door bins with bottle holders, and there's the usual ticket clip in the driver's sun visor. Time to take a look in the back seat. Now, you might expect this to be the point where this Cupra's aspirations in appealing to the upper part of the mid-sized EV segment, such as the Volkswagen ID.4 and Polestar 2 size models rather than ID.3 and Kia Niro size contenders, might begin to fall apart a little. After all, though, as we told you earlier, the Born is a little longer than an ID.3. It actually has a fractionally shorter wheelbase than that pretty compact little hatch. Not that any lack of space is really noticeable once you take a seat in the back. There's certainly a lot more room here than the relatively compact outward dimensions might suggest. It's a wider cabin than that of a Golf or, say, a Nissan Leaf, And with no central transmission tunnel to obstruct things, 3 adults could fit more easily into the back of this car than just about any compact hatch we can think of, other than an ID.3. So yes, the Born's a full 5-seater, provided the adults in question don't have particularly long legs. There's not a lot of knee room going spare. A Leaf offers a little more space to stretch out, but has a lower ceiling and, as we've said, less elbow space too. This bench doesn't either slide or recline, which isn't expected in this class, but is the kind of functionality that you get from the rear seat of a similarly priced SUV. But there's a reasonable amount of storage provision back here, including compact door bins built into these rather blandly trimmed door cards. The seat backs have the usual pockets, but don't also include the additional useful phone holder pockets you get in an ID.3. There are twin USB ports to charge your handset, though because they're of the USB-C variety, you might need a converter lead. You also get an armrest with twin cup holders, overhead reading lights and coat hooks in the grab handles. If you want more of an airy feel back here, go for the optional panoramic glass roof, which, with a length of 130 centimetres and a width of 111 centimetres, is exceptionally big and comes with an electric blind. We'll finish with a look at the boot, which lifts with a push on this central Cupra badge. The trunk is 385 litres, the same size as an ID.3, and about the same size as a Golf too, despite the presence of an electric motor down under the floor here. You might have hoped for a little more, but a child buggy or a couple of reasonably sized suitcases should easily fit once you've lumped them over this notably high loading lip. That's evened out with the adjustable height double boot floor that, annoyingly, Cupra makes you pay extra for. Lift the flimsy-feeling standard cargo area base and there's a near compartment for leads, which, irritatingly, isn't big enough for both leads, the one for public chargers and the one for a domestic socket, which means that the second lead has to slide around in its bag, cluttering up the boot floor. You'd think that car designers would think more carefully about this kind of stuff and about designing EV model trunks with enough space to take a space-saver spare wheel. That, inevitably, is lacking here. There are 6 body-coloured tie-down points, a bag hook on each side, a bright LED light on the left and a 12-volt socket on the right. And to compensate for the fact that the rear seat lacks the flexibility of a 40-20-40 split, there's a ski hatch so that longer items can be poked through into the cabin. When you push everything forward, there's a reasonably flat cargo area, which frees up 1,267 litres of capacity. For a Cupra Born at the time of this test in autumn 2022, the brand was asking in the £35,000 to £40,000 bracket. The availability of a smaller battery, 45 kilowatt-hour 150 PS derivative, would obviously make that entry point price a little more affordable. There are 3 trim levels, V1, V2 or, as in this case, V3. And Cupra offers a useful free EV and Me app so that you can check out whether switching to an electric vehicle is right for you. From launch, the main powertrain option was the one we're trying here, a 58 kilowatt-hour battery mated to a 204 PS electric motor. Avoid entry-level trim and you'll have the chance to pay for a couple of powertrain upgrades. Around £800 more gets you the 58 kilowatt-hour battery, powering a perkier 230 PS e-boost electric motor, or around £3,600 more gets you the longer range of the larger 77 kilowatt-hour battery, which comes linked to that 230 PS e-boost motor. What about rivals? Well, again, we're quoting prices current at the time of this test in autumn 2022. Well, in terms of the similarly sized VW Group EVs that share this one's engineering, we'd expected pricing to pitch this Cupra above Skoda and comparable or a little above Volkswagen. We were wrong. The Born is the best value of the conglomerate's EVs in this sector. Spend £35,000 on an entry-level V1 spec, 58 kilowatt-hour 204 PS Born, and you'll be saving around £1,500 on a slightly smaller and less eye-catching Volkswagen ID.3 with the same 58 kilowatt-hour battery and 204 PS motor. The saving would be £3,000 on what you'd need for a base Skoda Enyaq IV60 with a slower 179 PS electric motor, and also around £3,000 on what you'd need for a base Volkswagen ID.4 in 52 kilowatt-hour form with an even feebler 148 PS motor. A base Audi Q4 Sportback 35 e-tron with a 51.5 kilowatt-hour battery would cost you around £10,000 more than a base Born, and again give you a feebler electric motor with only 170 PS. Comparing like with like against those comparably sized VW Group EV models is difficult because the Born's conventional 52 kilowatt-hour battery and 204 PS motor combination isn't really replicated anywhere other than with the ID.3. Closer comparisons can be made using a Born with a larger 77 kilowatt-hour battery, compared against Skoda Enyaq IV, Volkswagen ID.4 and Audi Q4 Sportback e-tron models with pretty much identical drivetrains. It undercuts the Enyaq in IV80 form by around £2,500, the ID.4 in Life Edition form by around £5,000, and the Q4 in 40 e-tron form by around £10,000. Actually, though, we think the most direct rival to this car comes from outside the Volkswagen Group in the form of Renault's Megane E-Tech. One of those has a 60 kilowatt-hour battery, a 215 horsepower electric motor, and a starting price tag that's pretty much bang on that of a base Cupra Born at around £36,000. There's an interesting symmetry between the two products as well, because Luca Di Meo signed off the Born when he was head of SEAT, then signed off the Megane E-Tech when shortly after he moved to be head of Renault. The model that Renault shares much of its technology with, the Nissan Leaf, is also a credible Born rival in long-range Leaf E+ form, which costs about the same as a comparable Born. Other rivals will definitely cost you more. Base versions of the Toyota BZ4X, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Nissan Ariya all start from around £42,000. Allow a 44k budget for base versions of the Polestar 2, the Kia EV6 and the Lexus UX300e. A £47,000 budget is required for base versions of the Mercedes EQA, the Genesis GV60 and the Volvo C40. It's around £48,500 for a rear-driven Tesla Model 3, and you'll need around £50,000 for base versions of the Ford Mustang Mach-E and Subaru Solterra, and around £52,000 for the least expensive Tesla Model Y and BMW i4. True, the pricier options in that list need to be pitched against a Born in perkier and longer range 77 kilowatt-hour 230 PS e-boost form, but one of those can still be had from as little as around £40,000. So the savings could still be significant. To give you some combustion perspective, we'll tell you that Cupra's similarly sized conventional crossover model in this segment, the Formentor, costs around £31,000 in comparable 2-litre TSI 150 auto rear-driven form, and from around £38,000 in PHEV guise as a 204 PS e-hybrid. So if considering all of that has convinced you towards Born ownership, the decider might be a generous level of spec. Well, as you'd hope for this kind of spend, all variants do come well equipped. There's LED headlights and tail lamps, auto headlamps and wipers, adaptive cruise control, sports suspension, all-round parking sensors, keyless entry, and a drive profile selection driving mode system with range, comfort, performance and individual settings. Plus, with the e-boost electric motor, you get an extra Cupra mode. Inside every Born, expect to find a 5.3-inch digital cockpit, instrument binnacle screen, ambient lighting, a rear-view camera, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror and front sport bucket seats. Media's taken care of by a 12-inch centre navigation display with an online voice assistant and all the usual smartphone mirroring and EV features. Plus, there's a Cupra Connect app so you can remotely interact with your Born, even when you're not with it. As for the differences between the various trim levels, well, V1 spec gives you 18-inch Cyclone alloy wheels and front seats in black sequel yarn. V2 spec offers smarter 19-inch Typhoon wheels and adds heating to the front seats, plus heat for the steering wheel and washer nozzles, along with rear privacy glass and an augmented reality head-up display. This V3 model is recognisable by its 20-inch Hurricane machined aero wheels, and it gains granite grey Dynamica upholstery with 12-way front power adjustment, pneumatic lumbar support and a massage function. As for key options, well, you'll need to tick the box for the optional cargo pack, which gives you a double boot floor and a 3-pin Mode 2 charging cable. And you might want to consider Cupra's Skyline panoramic glass roof, the 395-watt 9-speaker Beats audio system, and the brand's Dynamic Pack, which gives you dynamic chassis control adaptive damping. There are 2 tech packs, which include keyless entry, a wireless phone charger, and Car2X intelligent vehicle networking. The pricier of the 2 packs also gives you an intelligent park assist system that steers you into spaces. To keep EV range up in winter months, there's a heat pump, and Cupra offers various wheel size upgrades, all-season tyres, and with its top V3 spec, Aurora Blue Dynamica bucket front seats. Bear in mind that you'll almost certainly need to pay extra for your choice of colour. The only standard shade is non-metallic Vapor Grey. We've got Aurora Blue here. Lots of safety equipment comes as standard across the range, including forward collision warning with automatic braking, a driver alert tiredness recognition system, lane assist, which stops you from dangerously pulling out in front of other vehicles, and dynamic road sign display. There's also twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus the usual assistance for traction, braking and stability. Additions you might want to consider include emergency assist, which will bring the car to a safe and controlled halt if no driver inputs are detected, as might be the case if, for instance, you were taken ill at the wheel. You can also add side assist, which is basically a blind spot warning system that stops you from dangerously pulling out in front of other vehicles, which is packaged in with exit warning, which stops occupants opening their doors in the face of oncoming traffic. Cupra also wants you to consider adding its clever travel assist system, which will give the car a degree of semi-autonomous drive tech. This uses information from the adaptive cruise control and lane assist systems to actively keep the vehicle in the centre of its lane and adjust its speed to the flow of the traffic. Most customers will probably choose the 58 kilowatt-hour 204 PS package we're trying here, which offers up to 265.3 miles of driving range. Add in the 230 PS e-boost motor, and that drops fractionally to a best of 262.2 miles. Stretch to a top derivative with the 77 kilowatt-hour battery, and the range figure rises to 343. At the time of filming, Cupra hadn't confirmed whether it was going to import the base 45 kilowatt-hour 150 PS model, but for reference, that variant offers up to 211 miles of driving range. Rather refreshingly, by the way, the battery size figures Cupra quotes for this car are net usable ones, a more honest trend started by Tesla. Other brands sometimes tend to quote gross battery sizes, then put the net usable size in the small print. You'll need to select the car's most frugal range drive mode to get anywhere near the quoted mileage figures, of course, which restricts throttle travel and air conditioner output. You'll also need to be frequently selecting the B regenerative braking setting provided by the gear selector. With this engaged, the electric motor functions as a generator and feeds power back into the battery, and you'll experience quite abrupt off-throttle retardation, up to 0.3 G, claims Cupra. Also helping is the car's built-in Eco Assistance feature, which helps you think ahead when driving by giving you instrument cluster recommendations based on the situation of the road ahead. A warning of a forthcoming roundabout, for instance. As for preserving range in really cold weather, which is when battery outputs usually struggle a little more, you can in theory improve the quoted figures, or at least preserve them. by specifying the optional energy-efficient heat pump that Cupra wants to charge you £925 more for. Other segment rivals like the Mercedes EQA supply this as standard. Checking out EV owners' forums reveals that this doesn't always happen in practice, though. You won't be surprised to hear that this Cupra's quoted range figures broadly replicate what you'd get from the other VW Group mid-sized EV crossover models in this market segment. The Skoda Enyaq iV, the Volkswagen ID.3 and ID.4 twins, and the Audi Q4 e-tron. In our market section, though, we highlighted this car's closest rival as being Renault's Megane E-Tech. One of those has a 60 kilowatt-hour battery that takes you up to 280 miles. You'll want to know how these range figures compare to other segment EVs from brands outside the Volkswagen Group. So, let's take the 58 kilowatt-hour 204 PS Born package we're trying here, with its 265-mile range as a base point, and look at comparably priced rivals with similarly sized batteries and motor outputs. A 63 kilowatt-hour Nissan Ariya manages 223 miles. A 58 kilowatt-hour Hyundai Ioniq 5 manages 238. A Mercedes EQA 250, 265. A Toyota BZ4X or a Genesis GV60 manage 280 miles. And a rear-driven Tesla Model Y 283 miles. So yes, this Cupra's EV range showing is there or thereabouts. You can go further with some other rivals we haven't mentioned, but that's because they have larger batteries, which means you need to then be comparing them with the 77 kilowatt-hour version of this model. Total range, of course, might not matter too much if this car could be quickly charged. So how does it do there? Well, again, as you'd expect, the figures pretty much exactly replicate what you get from other VW Group EVs in the sector, and are broadly competitive with the rest of the segment, though this model's 400-volt electrical architecture isn't ready for future really fast public chargers in the way that the 800-volt systems are in rivals like the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Genesis GV60. As you'd expect, the Born is compatible with both AC and DC charging networks, and you can plan your charging regime using either the e-manager section of the centre screen or by the appropriate section of the Cupra Connect app. Let's start with public charging for this Born, and we'll give you figures based on charging from 5 to 80%. Using the feeblest 50 kilowatt charging points, a 58 kilowatt hour model takes 55 minutes. It's up to an hour and 12 minutes for the 77 kilowatt hour version. With a faster 100 kilowatt or 120 kilowatt charging point, a 58 kilowatt hour model takes 35 minutes. A 77 kilowatt hour model at a 170 kilowatt charging point reduces that to 30 minutes and can add 62 miles of range in just 7 minutes. As for home replenishment, well, with an 11 kilowatt garage wall box, a 58 kilowatt hour model charges from empty to full in 6 hours 15 minutes. With the 77 kilowatt hour model, it's 7.5 hours. Customers will be offered a Cupra branded domestic wall box for home charging, which can be controlled using the company's easy charging smartphone app. If you were to plug into a domestic socket, the respective times would be 29 hours and 37 hours. From the launch of this car in late 2021, Cupra reckoned that a typical Born user would save about £730 a year in operating expenses over what they'd pay to run a comparable combustion engine model. But that, of course, was before energy prices spiralled. There's still likely to be a useful saving, though, over fossil fuel. And anyway, it's not only that your energy costs will be lower, you should also make savings in road tax and the fact that no oil changes are required. Plus, regenerative braking means that the brake pads are designed to last the life of the car. There's a fixed servicing schedule with a basic inspection after 2 years, unlimited mileage, and a subsequent service every year or 20,000 miles. And of course, for company drivers, the benefit in kind taxation exposure will be a lot more affordable compared to a fossil fuel burning model. All versions of this Born attract a super low BIK rating of 2% that applies to all EVs in this segment. Compare that to the 37% rating of an equivalent Cupra Formentor 2-litre TSI 150. Even a Formentor in e-hybrid 204 plug-in hybrid form is rated at 12%. The low BIK rating is down, of course, to the fact that, like any EV, this one has a zero emissions CO2 figure. Of course, the energy to drive this car has to cause pollution somewhere. This Cupra has a well-to-wheels carbon contribution of 32.1 grams per kilometre. Compare that to 35.9 grams per kilometre for the ID.3. And the Born has an efficiency rating of 4.5 miles per kilowatt, though in colder months we've heard reports that this can fall as low as 2.7 miles per kilowatt. Either way, this Cupra is some way from being completely green. You can monitor your current miles per kilowatt reading, by the way, via a driving data section of the centre screen, which gives you long-term and since charging mile per kilowatt hour readouts. As for the warranty, there's the usual unremarkable VW Group brand 3-year or 60,000 mile package, which can be extended at extra cost to either 4 years and 75,000 miles or 5 years and 90,000 miles, but shouldn't have to be. The Spanish maker says that its aim is to make sure that the battery pack lasts as long as the car, and sure enough, that battery pack is warranted to give at least 70% of its usable capacity after 8 years or 100,000 miles. What else? Well, residuals should be strong. Industry experts are quoting up to 47% after 3 years. What about insurance ratings? Well, a 58 kilowatt-hour 204 PS model like this one rates at Group 25p. It's 28p for 58 kilowatt-hour and 77 kilowatt-hour variants with the e-boost motor. Finally, your green-minded friends might be interested in this car's claim to be carbon neutral. It's produced using a carbon offset scheme in a factory powered by renewable energy. Interior materials like the sequel yarn used to upholster the seats of V1 and V2 models are made from waste plastics recovered from the Mediterranean, and the cabin abounds with non-animal sourced fabrics. This is the way a 21st century family car ought to be fabricated. It is, you could say, this Born's legacy. The decision to replace Seat badges with Cupra ones on this Born EV was interesting and says much about the VW Group's commitment to its sporting brand. Plus, it also fits with this design's mildly dynamic vibe. Yes, in some ways, it's a Volkswagen ID.3 in a tracksuit, but at the same time, it also offers something just a little different and arguably more appealing. It's not as different from an ID.3 as Cupra thinks it is. The Born's cause would have been helped in this regard if the brand had standardised the faster e-boost motor and made that a unique selling point. But this car is more engaging to drive and, to our eyes, more engaging to look at too. Do you really want to pay considerably more in this segment to get only slightly more space and fractionally more driving range from an EV that almost certainly won't be as interesting at the wheel or look as good on your driveway? Such is the Born ultimatum, and we can understand if you found yourself tempted by it.